The back to school season is upon us, and one of the things that always kept me up at night before going back to school was what classroom management system I was going to use. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 3 systems I love and 2 I think you should run far, far away from. Stay tuned. What's kicking, educational rock stars? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Farah from Farah Henley Education, where I strive to bring you actionable tips, strategies, and simple systems to take back into your classroom to make your teacher life a little easier and get bigger impact in your students' learning. Now, if this is your first time joining us here on the channel, welcome. If you would be so kind to hit that like and that subscribe button so that you get notified when we go live or upload a new video here on the channel. Also, if you love the tips that I'm sharing, be sure and smash that like button, because that is going to help other teachers just like you find this video and get some ideas for their classroom. Now, today's video is all about classroom management, because the fact is most of you are probably getting ready to go back into the classroom for the fall semester. And when we go back into the classroom and we're preparing for an upcoming school year, one of the biggest things that's on our minds is classroom management. Now, classroom management can be a nightmare, and every year I would struggle to decide, am I going to use the same system that I used the previous year? Am I going to try something new? Do I really need to try something new? Did what I used last year work? You know, listen, my thoughts ran the gamut, but all in all, I always came back to the tried and true classroom management strategies that I learned years ago, and I always used those strategies, and I want to share them with you. And probably one of the biggest reasons that I always came back to those strategies, because they were stinking simple. And I'm all about not fixing what's not broke. Let's don't fix it if it ain't broke, right? So today, we are going to be talking about those classroom management strategies that I love, but I'm also going to be sharing with you a couple that I think you should absolutely steer clear of and avoid. And I'm going to share with you why I think that. Now, I'm not going to go into like complete detail about all these classroom management systems, because that would take way too long. I'm just going to give you some highlights and things about them. And then I'm going to share some links for you to go check some other things out as well. And I might, if you leave comments down below and you're interested in seeing a full tutorial on any of these classroom management systems, then I might do a video for each one individually and how I use them in my classroom. The first classroom management system, again, that I loved and used for many years was the scoreboard. Now, the scoreboard is so stinking simple. I did not come up with it. In fact, I actually learned about it through an organization that I was formerly an executive board member and national trainer for, and that is Whole Brain Teaching. Now, I love the scoreboard. They didn't invent the scoreboard, but the way that they implement a scoreboard, obviously scoreboards have been around for years, but the way they implemented a scoreboard in the classroom was something that was new to me. Now, I have since found some other systems that use a similar type scoreboard, but it was new to me at the time that I found it, and I absolutely loved it. So let me kind of explain how the scoreboard works. It is so stinking simple. Literally all you need is an expo marker and your whiteboard. That's literally all you need. You're going to draw a simple scoreboard on the board, and I always like to start off with my students versus the teacher. And you could, depending on if you go into the lower grades, if you go over to wholebrainteaching.com, you'll see that they have smileys and frownies, and there's all different types of things that they've done. Now, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to be very, very honest, that I believe that they've made it too complicated. They've taken it to all these levels, and I 100% believe you don't have to do that. The simple scoreboard is really all you need. In fact, most years, even when I was a trainer and I was having to use all those different methods of using the scoreboard in my classroom so that I could train on them, I always came back to a simple scoreboard with either smileys and frownies or teacher versus student. That was it, and it lasted all year. In fact, there was several years that I didn't go anywhere beyond that one level of the scoreboard. Literally, smileys and frownies or teacher versus students. That's all I ever did. And it worked all year. Now, there are some key things that you need to remember when you're using a scoreboard. First of all, you're going to draw a simple little T-chart on your board. One side's going to be for the students, one side's going to be for the teachers, smileys, frownies. And basically, you're giving yourself points, yourself or the students points, when they're doing and following the rules and doing things that they're supposed to be doing. Or if they're not, then you're going to get points. Now, if you're using smileys and frownies, that's going to be, yes, so everybody's on task, everybody's doing a good job, everybody's following the rules, they get a smiley. But if they're not, they're going to get a frowny. Now, one thing that Whole Brain Teaching has introduced into the scoreboard is what's called the 1 second party or a mighty groan. Now, this was key to the scoreboard working well for me. And you had to really get good at your 1 second parties because it's literally supposed to be 1 second. It's not a 3 second party. It's not an 8 second party. It is a 1 second party. So you have to get really, really good at this. You have to practice it. When you give the students a smiley or you give the students a point, I often would say, wait for it. And then I would point to them, and they knew that meant they were going to go, oh yeah. And it was literally that fast. And it would get loud, and they would say, oh yeah. And we would move on. There was no extra. There was no oh my gosh, that was so great. There was none of that. It was literally a 1 second party, and I move on with my teaching. This does take practice, but once you get it down and you really, embrace it, it is so powerful. And the same thing goes for if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing and they're not on task, and you're going to give them a frowny, or you're going to give yourself a point because you don't have friends who are following along with the directions, or they're not following the rules, or whatever the case may be. Sometimes it's just because somebody's not sitting in their chair correctly. And I'll explain that in a moment. But when you give them a mighty groan, you're simply going to give them mighty groan, and you give the point, and they're going to raise their shoulders all the way to their ears as quickly as possible and just say, and that is exactly how fast it's supposed to be. No long drawn out, oh no, why do we get none of that? In fact, that would get them another mighty groan, or you another point. Now, there is another key detail to the scoreboard is that you got to keep it close. Listen, if you go to a basketball game with your favorite basketball team and they get really, really far ahead, what do? You leave, because you know they're going to win, and you go ahead and check out and leave so that you can beat the traffic. What happens if your basketball team gets way, way, way down? You leave, because you know that there's no way that they can come back and win, and you want to beat the traffic and get home, and quite frankly, you're probably frustrated and you're just ready to get out of there. The same thing is going to happen with the scoreboard in your classroom. You got to keep it close. Let me repeat that. You got to keep it close, because if you let the students get too far ahead with either smileys or points for the students, then they're going to check out, or they're going to think, oh, we've got some wiggle room. We can afford to give up a few points. You don't want them thinking that. The same is for the reverse. If you allow them to get too far down, then they're going to think there's no way we can come back from that. There's no way that we can recover. We are going to just give up, and we're just going to do what we want to anyway. So, key is to keep it stinking close. All right. Now, that's as much as I'm going to say about the scoreboard. If you've got more questions, be sure and drop them in the comments down below, and I'll be happy to come back and answer them. And if you'd like a full tutorial of exactly how I introduce this and exactly how I implement this in my classroom, leave a comment down below, and I'll be sure to get that on the schedule. The last few years that I was in my classroom, I started implementing what's called house points. I absolutely loved implementing house points. Now, the first time I saw house points, I saw them from Ron Clark Academy, and they have their entire school separated into houses. Now, I wasn't going to do that inside my school. The last school I was at, we actually did that inside. They were starting to implement that school-wide, but I did it in my own classroom for a few years, and I also combined it with the scoreboard. Now, the way that I ran my house points is I divided my students up into houses. And we actually did a random draw where I had them come draw. I did a Harry Potter theme one year, so we actually had a sorting hat, all that. But you don't have to do that theme in order to do this. In fact, I did it several years later, or several years after that I didn't use that Harry Potter theme. So, But the way I did it was I divided my students into houses, and then not only were they competing on the scoreboard, teacher versus students, that was whole class, but now we were getting a little bit more, we were getting it down to just small groups of students, and now they've been working as a team towards a common goal. Simple and easy. Anytime I saw them doing something that was a great, they could go and they could put a marble in their jar. I actually had little jars, got them at Hobby Lobby, got some little marbly looking rocks, and they could go and they could earn rocks or marbles into their jar for anytime I caught them doing things. Now, it doesn't matter what you decide you're going to give them marbles and rocks for. You are going to decide what you want your class to do. Some classes are going to need to work on talking. Some classes are going to need to work on not asking to go to the bathroom all the time. It's going to be based on what your classroom needs. But anytime I caught them being good, I hate to use that word, but you know what I mean, I would give their team a marble or a rock. And then once they reached a certain level, they would get some sort of like reward. But they were working as a team to reach that reward. So this really did teach teamwork, and it made them hold each other kind of accountable. I can't tell you the number of times that I saw a student in the middle of me teaching raise their hand, and a student in their house reach over and go, "Put your hand down," because they knew that if they asked, that was going to result in them losing a marble or losing a rock, okay? Because I did take away rocks or marbles if things happen. So, and that's completely up to you. You can keep it all positive, or you can have consequences as well. But typically we would count these up at the end. Either they reached a certain goal, or we would count them at the end of the 6 weeks, and whichever team had reached the goal or had the most actually got whatever the reward was. Most of the time these rewards were eating lunch in the classroom with me. Sometimes I did where I brought in the little ice cream cups and they got to sit and have ice cream with me after lunch. You can decide what you want to do. It was a reward for the whole team, but it wasn't something that they were getting on a daily basis. They actually had to work for it. This next system for classroom management takes it even down further. So first of all, we had the scoreboard, and that was whole class. Then I introduced the house points, and that brought it down a little bit. So now they're working in teams. But the next one that I love is called the Super Improver Wall. Now, this is another system that I learned when I was an executive board member and national trainer for whole brain teaching, and I absolutely loved this system. Now, like the scoreboard, I'm going to say this with a caveat. They have made it very, very complicated, okay? And I am still all about keeping it stinkin' simple. The Super Improver Wall is so powerful, and there's no reason to make it more complicated than the basic version, because the basic version is just that powerful. The basic concept is that we are going to reward we are going to reward students for improvement, not ability. Because here's the problem. We have students that come into our classroom that are below grade level, and we have students that come into our classroom that are above grade level. Now, if we reward them on ability, obviously that student who is below grade level is not going to be able to do the same work that that student that is above grade level is going to be able to do. And most of the time when you've got students that are even on grade level, the same for both. I mean, it's just a complete mess. When you reward for ability, it's very unfair. But when you reward for improvement, you're able to let that student start where they're at and make improvement and get rewarded and get that feedback and get that that empowerment that they get from knowing that they've made improvement. So if you have, and this is a story that we used to tell when I would do trainings, if you have two runners and one runner is already running a mile at a 4-minute mile, and another runner is running a mile at an 8-minute mile, and you have them race, and the 4-minute mile person runs their race, and they run it in 4 minutes, and the person that runs it in 8 minutes runs it in 8 minutes, and you have them practice and train and all of that, and the 4-minute person still runs it in 4 minutes, and you're like, yay, way to go, you're still running in 4 minutes. But the person who's running it in 8 minutes actually runs it in 6 minutes, but they're not beating the 4 minutes. Do you not like reward them for all their hard work and all their improvement? Absolutely not. They have made great strides. And the same thing goes for our students. You want to make sure you're rewarding for that improvement, and some kids need that. This not only helps your students who are below grade level, because they're going to be able to see their improvements and they're going to be able to see, and it doesn't necessarily have to do academically, it could be behavior as well. But it's going to allow them to make those small baby steps and make improvement and feel empowerment. But it's also going to help those students who are your perfect little patties or your high achieving academic students, because they are required to improve as well. I like to tell this story. I had a 4th grade student who came into my classroom one year, and she was reading on an 8th grade reading level. Now, she came in with a little bit of an attitude because she was already reading on an 8th grade reading level. She knew she was reading on an 8th grade reading level, and she thought she was going to get to skate by in my classroom. No, ma'am, no, ma'am. I told her that and when I got the Super Improver Wall implemented, I told her that she was on an 8th grade reading level, so I wanted her on a 9th grade reading level by the end of the year. I had a full year of teaching reading to this child. I wanted to see her grow. I wanted to see her improvement. She was shocked, but her parents were extremely excited. But the thing is, my student, who was also a 4th grader but was on a 2nd grade reading level, I needed to get as much growth out of him as possible. And I was able to reward his growth just as much as I was able to reward the other students' growth using the Super Improver Wall. Now, the way you implement the Super Improver Wall, the way that it's set up and all that, you can find all of that information at wholebrainteaching.com. Again, go with the basic version. You don't need all the bells and whistles. And if you would like a full tutorial on how to implement the Super Improver Wall or how I did it, leave a comment down below and I will get that on the schedule. I told you that I was going to be sharing with you 3 classroom management systems that I love, and I did. I shared one all the way from whole classroom down to groups and individual teams, all the way down to individual behavior. Now, I have 2 that are like thorns in my side, and anytime I see people using them, I cringe. I absolutely cringe. I cannot stand these systems. But the problem is that I have used them myself. Yes, I am guilty. I am guilty of using them in the past, but I cringe now because I know there is a better way. And the first one that I want to share with you is clip charts. Oh my gosh, clip charts. You know, those clip charts where it's like all green up at the top and red down at the bottom, and the kids have clothespins and they clip up and down, clip up and down. Now listen, if you are using one of these charts, I'm not here to shame you, but I will tell you that there is something that is just wrong with publicly displaying an individual student's behavior. I cannot stand, and I'm guilty, I did it. But once I understood that when a student clips all the way down to red, where else are they going to go? They're like, I'm already at the bottom. And I understand, I hear the argument, people say, yeah, but they can earn their clip back up. Guys, you know as well as I do that if parents came in there and saw everybody else's clip up at green and their child's clip down at red, it's embarrassing for the parent as well. Don't get me started on why that's a bad thing. That on the parents, not on you. But it is embarrassing for the student as well because they see their name down there. And I get it. I mean, look, as a Gen X kid, a little embarrassment didn't hurt. But, guys, it's just not best practice. And it actually doesn't work. So I'm going to firmly request that, and I'm going to beg you to throw the clip chart out and try using one of the other methods that I've shared today. Now, the second method that I think you need to absolutely avoid is treasure boxes. And I am here to tell you, I spent so much money on treasure boxes for treasures and little gifts and little like trinkets. Go get something out of the treasure box. Go get something out of the treasure. I spent so much money on this from Oriental Trading in my classroom. It was ridiculous. But here's the thing, and this is another kind of wisdom piece that I used to share when I was doing trainings for whole brain teaching. If you give your students a slinky in the beginning of the year, and then let's say by Christmas they're going to want popcorn. And then by February, they're going to want a whole dang party. And then by May, they're going to want a trip to Disneyland. Listen, when we give our students junk, which is all that stuff is in those treasure boxes, when we give them junk, we create junkies. Yes, I said it. You create junkies. They start wanting more. You give them a little, they want more. You give them a little, they want more. That's why I am telling you to get rid of the treasure boxes. Now, does that mean you never give your students rewards? No. Obviously, I said with the house system, there is a reward that they're working for. And we started those rewards off small in the beginning of the year. And when I say small, I mean teensy small. And we worked up to where the biggest reward they got was getting to have ice cream with me in the classroom at lunch. This was like literally the last quarter. That's what the reward was. The same thing goes for the scoreboard. Yes, there's rewards, but there's small rewards. Maybe it's 1 minute extra recess. Maybe it's 1 minute to talk at the end of the day before the bell rings. Guys, you have complete control over that, and I'm going to kind of go back a little bit. That's the great thing about the scoreboard is don't tell your students. You control who wins. Now, I realize it may be really hard to give up your treasure box, but guys, it is going to save you so much money, and in the end, it doesn't work because they're not learning intrinsic reward. They're not learning to follow rules. They're not learning to be better. They're not learning to be great and improve with their behavior or their skills. They're not learning all of that just for the joy and the love of learning all of that. They are actually doing it to get a piece of junk. And when they go into the world, that's not going to help them be good humans because they're not going to do things unless they get something in return. So now I've shared with you 3 systems that I absolutely love in my classroom, and I've shared 2 systems that I vehemently think that you need to stay away from. If you have any other systems that you are loving, be sure and leave those down in the comments below. And if you would like to see a tutorial of any of the systems that I've mentioned today, except the 2 that I just absolutely think you shouldn't do, be sure and leave that down in the comments as well. Now, if you're looking for more tips, strategies, and simple systems to take back into your classroom to make your teacher life easier, check out the videos on your screen. Thanks for watching, and keep being educational rock stars.